Okay, so polarity. I wanted to talk about polarity basically because one thing I've noticed that happens a lot in the spiritual community, inverted commas, air quotes on this, is that essentially people tend to get quite caught up in dualistic thinking, good versus bad, left versus right, etc, 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 and us versus them. And it happens quite a lot. And in actual fact, we are not dualistic beings, much as we like to pretend to ourselves that we are. Like, the whole reason why I bang on about shadow work a lot is because of the fact that we are actually a full range. Doesn't matter which way you swing it, we are a full range. We have, if you did the kind of work that I do and you delve into, for example, your Akashic records, and you have enough of a poke around in there, which is something obviously I've been doing quite extensively for the past few years, you start to realise that you are a fucking spectrum. You're not good, bad or indifferent. You are the whole range, from like despicable to like divine and amazing. And you will have lifetimes that will show you that. The thing is, we're focused in this lifetime, here and now, and we have a tendency, because of all the conditioning that we've received, to think of ourselves as being kind of one note, rather than seeing that we are the whole fucking paint box, as it were. And I think it's important to understand polarity from the point of view of, like, you are everything. And if you look at polarity as being a sliding scale, and Abraham to Hicks talk about this a lot, you know, like, it's a stick and you've got two ends to the stick and there's no separation on the stick. It goes from one end of the stick to the other end of the stick. So if you were to look at it as, like, say, for example, Doc Moody, when you watch this, if you were to look at a mixing desk, you've got like the bottom end of the range. I played around in the studio when I was younger. It was so much fun. But you've got the bottom end of the range of frequency on any of the sliders, basically, on a big mixing desk. And you've got the top end. And you get to choose where you're pitching the slider. And polarity is exactly the same. But it doesn't mean to say if you pitch yourself in a certain place that the other fucking bits of the slider aren't available to you, and that you don't sometimes go into them. And it's an interesting one, actually, because I kind of see, when you start looking at the way that shadow works, as it were, like, and this is the point where I'm going to recommend a book to you all. Existential Kink, which is by Caroline Elliott, basically. Really good book that talks about this. So on the surface, you're like, on the surface level human, basically. You think of yourself as, you know, you've been raised Christian or Catholic or fucking whatever, and you're a good person, and da-da-da-da-da, and you've been given all these labels and all this conditioning and da-da-da-da-da, all of this stuff, and you're taught that this is right and that's wrong, and etc, etc. Like, this is how society works, and if you do this, you're bad, and so on and so forth. And you're taught about the drama triangle, which is victim, villain, rescuer, and there's whole loads of other sorts of drama that go on as well as that. And so when you're in that kind of mindset of only kind of, I'm going to say, skimming the surface of human experience, like you've been trained to be a good girl or a good person, you think of good or pleasurable or whatever as being basically heaven, right? But when you delve down into the shadow stuff, and the shadow stuff is the stuff you don't see about yourself. So it's like, it's all of your darker impulses and instincts that, like, are underneath the surface that you don't, generally speaking, connect with, because shame, guilt, fear, all of that stuff. Like, you could say the dark feminine and the dark masculine. What people don't seem to understand is that your shadow, when it's unresolved and it's not integrated and you're coming from this dualistic perspective of like, this is good and that's bad, I enjoy this but I don't enjoy this, what you're not understanding is the fact that your shadow is a little bit like a gimp in a dungeon that gets off being beaten. It gets off on being beaten, basically, like spanked, you know, ball gag, all of that stuff. Okay. And not necessarily literally, but from the point of view of your shadow actually gets pleasure from being a victim. Your shadow gets pleasure from being the villain. Your shadow gets pleasure from being the rescuer. And these dynamics that are being ignored, basically, end up colouring your relationships. And actually, when you look at the polarity side of things in terms of your polarity settings, you can basically be running what I would call like, you're there going, I want to experience pleasure. And in actual fact, what you're getting is masochistic pleasure out of basically constant disappointment, not getting what you want, da 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 da. Like on some level, the darker, more denied parts of your soul are getting off on this stuff. At a human level, you're there going, oh my God, all the bad stuff's happening to me. And it's really, really important that you understand that in order to change your settings, first you've got to confront the fact that you're actually on some level that you're deeply denying, getting a level of vicarious pleasure from your failure, okay? When I talk about being the cake, it's like, you know, be the cake of life, you know, it's the ups and downs and the in-between. It's a whole fucking roller coaster of the whole thing. You know, we like to think that we're only here to experience one note of the human experience, but we're actually here to experience a full range. But you can't go into deliberate creation until you start to not only embrace your full range and your full polarity, but to understand how all of it works together, basically. And this is why polarity is a really important discussion, because most people have no idea where the fuck they are on the scale with their own settings. And I'm going to check to see if anyone's actually talking to me. I don't think so. Right. So you might be thinking you're having like a really hard time in life or whatever. I know someone's watching me. Love that. I tagged absolutely fucking everybody. Hopefully this isn't going to end up on everyone's thingy. Ah, right. Awesome. Yay, Astrid, you're there. I know sometimes it's a bit slow. I'm like, I know someone's watching me. Who the fuck is it? Basically. Yeah, so like the polarity thing, at the end of the day, I think we've got to really kind of like, if we're going to get anywhere on this planet in general, we've got to get out of the habit of demonizing our darker and more socially unacceptable parts, for starters, because in actual, well, and this is what shadow work's about. You don't kill the shadow. What you do is you integrate it, and in order to integrate it, you have to actually be able to look at it in the face and love it, and actually understand it, and understand. And one of the parts of the fucking whole process of doing the kind of work that I do and others do as well, but we all do it in different ways, is actually being able to get really fucking honest with yourself about where you have created patterns that have then created other patterns in other people. And then like you see kind of like how all of these, you could say, if you were looking at it as like swirls of paint or fractals, for example, and this is where chaos theory is kind of interesting and comes into stuff. And I think about all of this stuff quite a lot. Like I've done so much delving into like the nature of energetic dynamics, spiral dynamics, and so on and so forth. Okay, so basically you've got this whole thing of like a pattern starts somewhere. Basically, when you have a reaction to something and it's unresolved, it then tends to, when it's unresolved and you've had this reaction, say a trauma reaction to something that's happened to you, and it's embedded into your cells, and it gets reactivated when you get put in certain situations. What happens is your kind of fractal of distress then causes you to create equal and opposite reactions in other people around you. And so you end up creating what I would call chaos dynamics with people around you without any awareness, and then blaming them for things that are going on because you're playing out an unknowing drama triangle, basically, because you haven't got a handle on the fact that you're on your polarity scale with that person. You're actually doing what I would call masochistic pleasure rather than just pleasure, if that makes any sense. So you might be saying, I just want to enjoy my relationships, and I'm like, and you're looking at it on the surface and going, I don't enjoy my relationship with this person, but I'm trying really hard and I'm like focusing on enjoying my relationship with this person. It's just like, but you haven't dealt with the shit going on underneath. In actual fact, your shadow's really enjoying the dynamic with this person because you're playing the masochism game with them, and you're making them the villain and you're the victim, and da-da-da-da-da. And when you start to step up through the kind of levels of your own consciousness and start to take this eagle eye view down through all of these layers, you start to see the game and exactly how you're creating it. And that's when you have these kind of like the moments, and that's the point actually. When you do this, this is the point when you go into this is the point where you can actually go into what I call deep forgiveness. You realize actually, like, the deepest forgiveness is realizing there's nothing to forgive, because you suddenly start to realize how you are as culpable in the dynamic that's happened and everything that's happened around it as the person that you've been previously pointing your finger at. Okay. And so I think, you know, like, particularly at this moment now in time where everyone, you know, people talk about people being polarized, but in actual fact, you know, if you really embrace polarity properly, you actually come out of that space of being like at loggerheads with people, and you start to understand things at a much deeper level. And at the point where you start to understand things at a much deeper level, that's when you can start to change the fucking game. I wanted to share this with you because it's true. I've experienced it for myself. This is something I work with within my own life. This is something that, you know, when I'm working with clients, going into a more, I'm going to say like an intimate sort of like deeper dive into stuff, this is what I do with them. Without making it long-winded, it's like, essentially, it's usually you find actually when you do the right work with people, what happens is they'll suddenly have this aha moment and wake up to themselves. If you do the energetic work properly with someone, what happens is they wake up to themselves and they actually they see straight away where they've been creating all the shit they've been experiencing. They go from being like unconscious and like, why is everything always happening to me? Oh my God, it's such a fucking disaster, da 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 da, to shit, I'm in charge. I've been creating all of this the whole fucking time. And I now understand how I can change it, because I can see how I created that, and I can see how I create the opposite of that. And without all of the try hard, or you've got to think, you know, this whole thing, trying to control your thoughts. Trying to control your thoughts is an absolute shit house, by the way. Like, trying to think positive. You'll never probably gain more than about 3 days in your life successfully thinking positive and thinking happy thoughts before you fall off a cliff, because of the law of polarity. Okay, if you can get into understanding the dynamics of polarity and how you actually work with polarity within yourself, you don't have to think the happy thoughts and try and think positive and do the affirmations and all that bullshit. Okay, which is all very trying far too fucking hard, basically. Trying to force a result. It's a very masculine way of creating stuff. No offense to any of the men in this group, but it's what I call like that pushy, forcey energy is very what I'm going to say, sort of like your borderline toxic masculine in terms of like the way it works. It's like you can, when you understand how to work with the energy of things, you don't have to do all of this push dynamics in terms of like, I'm going to fucking affirm myself into the grave and I'm going to say all these things over and over and I'm going to do like the work in the mirror and all of these things. And like my daily spiritual practice takes me 4 hours of battering my head against a brick wall, basically. And I'm not seeing results for it, which, you know, you see a lot with people who kind of are into the law of attraction, but they're not like taking it any deeper than just, I have to think about what I want all the time, basically. Kind of, it's funny actually. Astrid, what are your thoughts on this? I'm going to ask you, I'm throwing it out to the room now. Yeah. Exactly. Not just seeing both sides of the stories. Like, I think it gets to a point when you actually know, when you do the work to a deep enough level, and when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about like understanding how to dismantle the constructs that you've created in the first place. What happens is you don't even have to try to see both sides of the story. They just present themselves to you. And then you start to actually, like, where it gets really interesting is when you start to have a really deep natural appreciation for all of your experiences, and you start to, and that's actually when you can get into a place of like being both incredibly moved by life and also incredibly in charge of it without feeling like you need to try and control anything. Does this make any sense? I've been having a lot of experiences of this recently. It's quite profound when you get to the point where you're moved to tears by the fact that someone has presented you with an experience that actually initially was really fucking difficult. Yeah, it is very toxic masculine energy. It's total, like, yeah. I never gelled with it. Like, I remember sort of, actually I have to say, like, the Abraham Hicks stuff, a lot of the kind of videos and stuff that they've done, I love the humor, but I can remember reading, like, I can't remember, Ask Isn't and It Is Given, I can't remember, one of the books. I've read quite a lot of the books way back, and there's lots of tools that they give of like how to raise your vibration, all of which are really fucking hard work. And I can remember just being like, all of this seems to me like it's trying too damn hard and there's something missing. And I always felt this. And nowadays I understand exactly why. I always was like, no, I don't like this. And actually, even, you know, people rave about Louise Hay too. Yeah, I honestly think, you know, all of these people, they've been brilliant because what they've done is they have presented a new view on things that didn't occur to people before. You know, obviously there was Jane What's-Her-Face and the Seth Speak stuff. But it's like they were the kind of, 3-hour morning ritual. Oh my God. You don't have time to live, do you, if you're doing that shit? Yeah, that went out the window. Fuck that shit. Yeah, but at the same time, I think we have to kind of, I will say, like, I'll take my hat off for the fact that they were the kind of forerunners of the, like, they started the ball rolling with people starting to understand stuff. But the problem is when people get stuck in that and then don't evolve past it, like, and I think, you know, the whole point with everything with us human beings is that we are supposed to be evolving, basically. And if you're spending all day, like one lovely bloke once, my old Adventurers Playground group that I archived a very long time ago, I remember some bloke answering the questions that I'd set up, like when they, you know, when they first brought in questions for Facebook groups that you had to answer. And I can remember basically asking him what he was doing to create massive impact. And he told me literally that he was meditating all day, every day. And I was a bit like, I think you're missing the point of being alive somewhere along there, mate. Do you know what I mean? It's if you're spending your whole life doing a ritual or meditating, you're not fucking living. It's another form of kind of weird escapism. It's a bit like drinking far too much or taking, you know, being a smackhead or, sorry, heroin addict. Like, sort of using colloquialisms. But any kind of escapism, like sex addiction or whatever, like meditating like all day, every day, you didn't come, like, you might as well just not be in a fucking body if you're going to do that. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's the same with all of these kind of rituals. You spend so much time in the ritual that there's no time to actually live normally. You know, do things like normal people, which we did actually come here to do. We came here to do things like normal people. And I come back to the polarity thing again, you know. We came here to do things like normal people. We came here to drink the wine. We came here to have sex. We came here to eat the food. Yes, exactly. We came here to, you know, we came here to have the relationships and the arguments sometimes and all of that other stuff. But we also came here to understand our true nature and elevate ourselves and evolve and all of that stuff, basically. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I started reading Becoming Supernatural, Joe Dispenza's book, and I was just like, I was just like, I love what he represents in terms of, you know, the work that he's doing is absolutely his soul work that he's come here to do. And I'm not going to fucking denigrate anyone for doing their soul work. They're all kind of laying a paving stone in the road that we're on, right? And I kind of feel like there are some of us who are here to push things further on. You know, you could say kind of like out at the leading edge in the front fucking line or whatever, first wave. Yeah. Basically. Escapism and ego boosting. Yeah, the whole kind of guru in a fucking cave up a mountain, like disconnected from the world, basically. And it is that thing of like, we are here to push understanding forwards, but not in a toxic masculine pushy forcey way, but more of a kind of like deepening into remembrance, self-awareness, etc., whilst also understanding how to marry that the spiritual, you know, everything's spiritual actually, with the physical, with the human. And I think the problem is that most people have like a fucking, basically what I would call a spirit body disconnect going on to a certain degree. There's a whole load of reasons for that. I mean, like for me, I had shit going on from other lifetimes that stopped me from fully grounding into my body. A lot of people who call themselves light workers, again, air quotes, what's going on with them is that they're calling themselves light workers because they're in denial of the dark, of their own darkness. What they're doing with that as well is they don't like being here because it feels dense. They don't want to actually land in their bodies properly, so they're like trying to fucking leave all the time. They then wonder why they don't make the money, why they're not having the impact, why they'll be like, I love money and money loves me, and then like there's no money going on, and they're not going into the deeper reasons why that is, like what the disconnection's causing at a deeper level, if that makes any sense. You know, that disconnect that happens shows up in the external world. You know, when there's an internal disconnect, what happens is you see the disconnect going on in terms of an inability to basically make an impact in the world, inability to connect with people, inability to make new friends, inability to connect with new clients, inability to, you know, inability of various different things. Like you can see it, like where they're disconnected from themselves inside, that just shows up on the outside as disconnection from the world, basically. And it's like just this constant feeling of escape, basically. And I don't like people, and all the people who are like, oh, you know, hell is, like when people say hell is other people, I realised I'd heard that so many fucking times at one point. People going, I love animals, but I hate people. And I'm like, I always loved people. I think what was interesting for me is when I started falling down my spiritual rabbit hole, and I think this happens with a lot of people, because what happens is like all of your programming from other lifetimes where you've been like a nun or a monk or fucking whatever, basically, you've been like a Buddhist, I don't know, up a mountain in Tibet, something along those lines. What happens is that shit gets reactivated within you, like the whole kind of holy orders, separation, spiritual superiority and snobbery, etc. There's a lot of that. And you see it a lot, like the spiritual ego stuff that goes on. Fuck, I remember being in one group, like Workers of the World, I had to leave. It was just literally full of people attacking each other and being horribly superior. And like, I'm spiritual and you're not, and you're in your ego. Hey, Nadia. How you doing, love? Yeah, and you see that a lot. Like, people fall down the spiritual rabbit hole and certain things happen, basically. And it's usually what happens is when you have your first awakening, as it were, you start to wake up. Me and Sabrina were talking about this the other day, where we were talking about how you have the awakening that's a false awakening, and then you have the real awakening that happens at some point. You always know when the real awakening happens, because there'll be some event that goes with it that you suddenly realize that you thought you were awake before, but actually you weren't. You were just going through the motions, basically. And you know, I had one of those moments for myself. It was actually literally an out of body thing where I saw myself in I was saying this I think it was in Vino Veritas last week. I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like a month or so ago when we were doing season 1. And I literally, I woke up in this line of sleeping people that were going up the side of this mountain to this pool, like literally floating up. And then I crawled through this window, and that was the point where I actually woke up. Like, it was like my soul woke up. Before it was like, it wasn't awake. Not really. Yet I had apparently been awakened, or I thought I had. You know, and was probably running around telling everyone, being an insufferable prick at the same time. You know, tends to happen, you know, and it is a stage, you know, like all these developmental stages we go through. But I think like the important thing with all of this stuff is, I think kind of the more that you actually kind of like ground into the truth of who you are, the less you end up feeling like you have to follow all of these rules. It's one of these things, isn't it? Like, I'd say kind of the people that I've seen who are the most conscious, like truly conscious, are the ones who fling the fucking rules out the window. And they're not like they're not obsessed with rituals and doing all the things and having an altar and all of that kind of stuff. Or if they have it, they're not attached to it. They're not like feeling like, I have to have this thing. Yeah. I have to have this thing in order to prop me up and like score some points so that I can prove that I'm spiritual. You start to realize that the whole of life in some ways is, I'm going to say, a deeply mystical experience, if that makes any sense. Like, and when you actually start to kind of delve into all of this stuff more fully, and you start to appreciate your full range of being and learning to not only love it, but work with it, embrace it, enjoy it. You kind of get to that point. Like I've even today, I was processing some stuff earlier. I've been like really kind of clearing some trauma from my body, some deep stuff. And I kind of went through a phase of grief, but then laughing. You know, when you kind of like, you can switch between these emotional states very, very quickly without getting stuck in any of them, because you start to embrace the whole thing as being like part of the ride, right? Without kind of going, oh my God, I'm feeling this, so therefore that means this, and that must mean I'm a this person, and God, they're like, what's the meaning of this in terms of like, and judging yourself, and you judge other people, and da-da-da-da-da, and like, I don't know. I think we come back to this thing of like, when you're really working with polarity in like the most powerful way, you completely step out of judgment. You start to realize how ridiculous judgment is, and then you start to see the value of absolutely every experience that you have, and you start to find all of it quite funny in a kind of cockeyed kind of a way. Even the stuff that frustrates you, you end up laughing about kind of very quickly indeed, whilst embracing the at the same time, and like feeling the power in that too, and understanding that, you know, it's all part of, you know, it's all part of what we've come here for. So we come back to this thing of like, and that's actually when you get to the point where you actually feel turned on by life. Yeah, exactly. You don't judge it, you just observe it, and then you start to see the beauty of it, and then like that's when stuff starts to get juicy. You start to actually just like, I don't know, it becomes a thrill ride. Yeah, it's really fucking cool. Cheers to that. It's like, I have to say, it's such a freeing thing, isn't it? Like just being able to let go of all the old bullshit. And I do feel like, you know, because I grew up in a household with a mother who, you know, I've been quite open in here about the fact my mother has been an interesting experience for me all the way through my life for various different reasons. She's quite narcissistic and like, I don't want to fully label her though. Like, she is a product of her upbringing. I found her very, very difficult at points in the past. I know if I were to see her now, I wouldn't take any of the shit that comes out of her mouth personally whatsoever. At one point, I found it very difficult and very hurtful, and so all of that. But and actually not even that long ago, and I'm now at the point of going, I'm not actively seeking her company just because I don't really like her that much from the point of view. She's not that much fun to be around. Basically, and I'm just like, you know, from the point of view of like sort of those kind of games where you're dealing with someone who's a covert narcissist and spends the whole time moaning about fucking everything all the time and trying to put you in charge of looking after them, which she's done since I was tiny. Yeah. And she even thinks it's amusing, the fact that I basically was put in the position of being the parent to her overgrown child from like when I was very young. But I know now that if I had to spend time with her, it would probably be water off a duck's back to me, because of the fact that I don't have any charge around my relationship with her anymore. Whereas actually not even that long ago, it was when was it? I think it was before the kids went away for the summer. Like, there was a whole thing, and I was literally just like beside myself because of the interactions I had with her. They were quite traumatizing for me, but I don't feel like they could even bug me now. Universe, not that I want that tested particularly. I've got other things I want to do with my time. But yeah, I think you start to see the funny side of stuff, and you feel moved by the things that are going on in the world. At the same time, you also understand that I think one of the things that happens is you understand like your limitations as a human being in terms of being able to affect change. And you'll, you know, do, for example, like you'll do grid work if you're guided to, or whatever, but you won't feel like you're responsible for the state of the world, and it's all on your shoulders, if that makes any sense. I know that like there was one thing that I came into this lifetime with that I'd been carrying for a really long time, that I've actually shifted, where someone a long time ago, many centuries, many millennia ago in Egypt, I was led to believe that I was responsible for the world. I mean, like, fucking sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And so I was carrying this sense of always being responsible for everybody, and like it's played out in this lifetime too. The stuff with my mum, stuff in relationships, friendships, everything, like very ingrained behaviors, even at soul level, shifted all of that stuff. You see this quite a lot in light workers. It's that whole kind of thing of like, I'm responsible for saving the world. And I'm like, you get to a certain point and going, not only do I understand that the world doesn't actually need saving, you get to the stage, you do actually get to a stage when you've delved into some of the really interesting stuff, in terms of like some of the experiences that I've had. As we're going off track from polarity a little bit here, some of the experiences that I've had have very clearly shown me exactly how many different timelines are playing out on this planet. And if you have any knowledge of many worlds theory, I was shown very, very clearly it's not a theory, it's a fact. We're bouncing between different versions of Earth all the time. And this is why you see things shift and change in your perception all the time. And this is why sometimes you'll see the matrix glitch out as such, because you'll have a conversation with someone who lives in a different country and they will present you with a completely fucking different reality to the one that you've either experiencing or you're even seeing presented in the media or whatever. And people say, oh, it's media lying and so on and so forth. Not necessarily. We are literally living more and more a multidimensional experience in a conscious way. And I think when people haven't caught up to that fact yet, they find it very, very difficult to understand that we are bouncing between all of these different versions of Earth all the fucking time. Yeah, I've had so many matrix glitches recently. Like, I seem to generate them on a daily basis. I used to find it kind of weird. Nowadays, I'm like, oh, I did it again. Brilliant. And I can actually feel when I'm about to shift into a different node, which is basically a different group of timelines, because I get dizzy and I can literally feel myself shifting. And then, like, things will change slightly on the outside. And, like, Nadia and I experienced this with the whole train journey saga when she was playing in London back in June. Yeah, basically. When you know how to play with the timelines, you can literally shift yourself out of one set of circumstances into another one really fucking easily. It's just like, and that's when you realise that there's actually nothing to be afraid of. Oh, yeah. Everything's going wrong. Oh, no, it's not. That was funny. Yeah, it's basically, you know, it is like we live in a movable feast. We have our own realities that we are living. We are also interacting with bigger realities on the planet, which also we're bouncing between different versions of those. It's just like, I think kind of the more and more conscious we get, basically, the easier we find it to navigate our way through all of this stuff. And that's, I think, like, the key point, like, the navigation, like, at the end of the day, we're all navigating the quantum, whether we know it or not, whether we admit it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. I would say, well, whether we know it or not, at a deeper level, we know. On the surface, we might not. But, like, your soul always fucking knows what's going on, even if the human side of you is a bit like, got a bucket on my head, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Basically, I think it's like, it's really important to kind of understand that, you know, which is why it's important. Like, you know, one of the primary things that I'll do with any client, and I don't tend to, actually, I find with me, I don't tend to journal so much on it, but like, I will ask myself, you know, like, the one question I always ask myself, and I would say to you guys, like, it's so fucking important. Like, if there's anything that you're trying to create, doesn't matter what it is, the most important question you can ever ask yourself, and fucking listen for the answer, is, what is my next divinely aligned step? Now, it might be, when I say step, I'm not necessarily even talking about an action. A step is like, what's the next thing for me? It could be an action, it could be an inaction. So, you know, it could be that you've been guided to work with someone, they're your next divinely aligned step. It could be that you're being guided to have a nap. It could be that you're being guided to eat a fucking donut. You know, like, your divinely aligned step doesn't have to have, like, come parceled up with angels blowing a fucking fanfare of trumpets around it. Your divinely aligned step could be putting on Spotify God forbid that I'm promoting Spotify on here, because they're a bit of a shit house in terms of the way that they pay musicians. But I will also say, all of the people bitching about Spotify, okay, this would probably be a slightly controversial opinion. If the musicians that are working with things and doing stuff had any fucking understanding of how to create, they wouldn't be bitching about Spotify, because they would be making revenue in the way that they wanted to, powerfully, without being attached to what someone else is doing in order for that to happen. Does this make any sense? We come back to this thing of people putting their power outside of themselves the whole fucking time. If you're in the position of being a deliberate creator, a powerful deliberate creator, it doesn't matter a fucking bean what somebody outside of you is doing with their music streaming service or anything else, actually, because you don't have to fucking sign up with them. You don't have to do stuff. You can create a different way of doing things. You can make money fucking come from whatever fucking channel that you like, provided you are not blocking it. Basically, we're very much like, we come back to this idea of people believe that you have to do a thing to get a thing. When it comes to jobs, etc. In actual fact, your only fucking job is to be who the fuck you are and clear away all the shit that prevents you from receiving your, I'm going to say, your birthright in terms of wealth. The reason why people don't receive their birthright in terms of wealth is because their channels for receiving it are blocked, because of the conditioning they're carrying, their beliefs about shit, the resentment energy. There's various different energies that get caught in people's systems that are literally so dense and so heavy that it's like having a brick wall up, basically. If you're carrying a lot of guilt and shame and resentment and fear and mistrust, those are energies. You're carrying those. You're going to find it hard to make money. You're going to find it hard to make connections. You're going to find it hard to do most things, actually. Everything becomes dense, heavy, slow, the way that it fucking moves. So you end up scraping. Everything's coming from lack. The only reason we hold on to those energies is because we're holding on to lack. And it's not just about mentality. It's about perception at a deeper level, like within yourselves, and actually how you have both trained yourself and been trained to view resources as limited, people as evil, blurdy blur, blurdy blur, blurdy blur, without, again, understanding polarity, without understanding your ability to adjust your settings in relationship to anything and anyone so that you get different fucking results. Basically. You know, this is one of these things. I feel like at some point I'm going to actually do some kind of a workshop, paid one, because I have actually been given the ability to do that here on Facebook. And I was looking at it going, oh, I should do that. I had a thing pop up on my business page. It's like, you can now put on events and charge for them. And I was like, oh, that was brilliant. And then I put it to one side and forgot about it. But I do actually feel like I need to do a workshop on this shit. You know, for people who don't yet understand any of this stuff, to actually help clarify things a bit. And I can get paid for it. Haruki's purring really loud whilst he's watching me. Oh. Animals do like being around me, generally speaking. I think animals know when people are kind of aligned with themselves properly, and they can also tell when people aren't. That's kind of one of the... You know what's really funny, actually? I always know when I'm like really fully fucking aligned with myself, because I get followed around the house by Sassy. She literally will be wherever I am, and she wants to be really close by, which is quite funny. Yeah, I do think Who here would be up for signing up to and paying to do a workshop with me? If raise your hand, say yes in the comments. I wouldn't be charging loads of money for it. I've sort of been pinging this idea around for a while, but haven't taken any action on it. If there is interest, I will actually seriously sit down and put something together. I think it might be fun. I guess I'd do it on Zoom. Cool. Awesome. Yay. Right. I think that's going in the pot of things I'm going to organise. Honestly, you don't want to look at the fucking list of things I need to organise. Actually, I'm getting better at organising stuff. It's like, I will say, generally speaking, my energy doesn't really match up with like mega organisation. I'm one of these things. I'm one of these people. I'm a bit of a fly by the seat of my pants person. I'll be like, I fancy doing this today. And it's just like, right, I'm going to make an announcement and I'll do it tomorrow kind of thing. And I know sometimes with this stuff, I need to do possibly a little bit more advanced planning than I currently allow for, generally speaking. You know, like Al's always saying to me, he's just like, he'll be like, what's the plan for today? And I'm like, the plan, Pinky, is there is no fucking plan like this. And he just looks at me and goes, oh God, basically. I tend to wake up in the morning and be like, yeah, I'm literally always going, what's my next divinely aligned step? And I just listen to myself and I do whatever the fuck it is, or don't do whatever the fuck it is. You know, and if my next divinely aligned step is spending the entire day lying on the sofa staring blankly at the ceiling and contemplating whatever pops up for me, then I do that. Quite funny. At the same time, Al also knows, because he watches me and like the way I operate, he also understands that I'm far more effective when I'm left to do this rather than him questioning any of my methods. When he's like, you should be doing this and you should organise this and da 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 da, basically, like what he gets is me stressed out, not any more fucking effective than I am when I am like basically just noodling around doing my own thing, which is a large amount of the time. You know, for me, I show up, the Quantum Creation group, which is my monthly subscription group that I run on here, my paid group. I show up in there really frequently because I love showing up in there really frequently, and I'm sort of creating stuff for them. And other than that, it's a bit of a movable feast. I was doing some one-to-one recently, and then I was having some realizations because I hadn't done it for ages, and I had like a massive hiatus. So I did a couple of one-to-one sessions and they were good, but I suddenly realised basically that I was actually finding them quite tiring, because I am one of these people, I'm so thorough when I'm working with someone that I'm like, I'm not going to stop until the job's done. So it started off me going 90 minutes and then it was like 6 hours. And it was like, right, I need to put the price up. And then I was like, I don't want to spend 6 hours online fucking doing anything with anybody. So I've changed that now. So like, I now basically have shifted the whole thing. So my one-to-one offer is like a whole day in person with me here in Hope, because that'd be loads of fun and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, I know not everyone who I know online is going to be able to afford to do that. So... and that's not a problem, you know, at the end of the day, like the people that can afford to do that will do that. The people who are motivated to do it will do it, you know, they'll want to come here, etc., etc. But I was just like, you know, when you're kind of going through these things of like, what's aligned for me, what's not. Sometimes you have to play around and experiment a bit and sort of see what feels good to you. At the end of the day, basically, it's never a good idea if you're doing one-to-one work with people to ever work. I will say this right now, you know, from my own experience, it's never a good idea to work in a way that doesn't feel really fucking aligned for you. And for me, in order for something to feel really aligned, it has to feel loads of fun, basically. I love helping people. I love watching them transform, so on and so forth. But I need to have fun when I'm doing it. I like lots of laughs. I like to be able to move around. I prefer to do stuff in person because it's like, I don't know, it's the connection energy so much more powerful than when you're just doing stuff online. Online, I like doing group stuff because I like the input of having a bunch of different people. I actually quite fancy doing some group stuff in person as well, but like at the moment I kind of think with all the COVID stuff, whilst that's still hanging around, there's a part of me that's got a bit of a question mark over it, just from the point of view of like, oh good God, would I have to be like asking people for fucking certificates, and like I can't even imagine what the insurance shit would be like on that. I don't want to think about it right now. But I know that me and Sabrina also are talking about doing stuff together. There's a plan. There is a plan. I'm not going to go into details. There's a plan for doing retreats in this area. I was in a few people together, and I've been looking at like potential options. In fact, almost as soon as I decided what that wants to look like and actually was getting like the information of like what would feel really good and fun, I was presented with an option, a viable option, by someone we know who literally brought me, I'll say right now, it does involve vineyards. Someone basically, one of Al's friends brought around a bottle of really nice sparkling wine from a vineyard near Hastings, which is not that far up the road, basically. And this stuff's fucking incredible. It's nicer than most of the Grand Cru vintage champagnes that I've had. It was absolutely lovely, and they have apparently accommodation in this big old fucking manor house, and like incredible grounds, because I was just like, I want to do retreats in a place that's either part of a vineyard or has a vineyard next door, and like you can get local produce and you can basically do like cooking with local stuff, and like it could be really fun, like it could be energy work but also food and social and like all the good shit, all the stuff that I enjoy. And yeah, so Danny turned up with 2 bottles of this sparkling wine, and he was just like, I got these for you and Al for your 10th anniversary. Oh, and yes, like this amazing place, and started talking about it. I was just like, oh, do they have accommodation? He was like, yes, they do, and it's incredible in this manor house, and da-da-da-da-da, and it's also not madly expensive, and so on and so forth. And I was like, oh, fucking brilliant. You literally, like, I just decided 2 days ago that this is what I want to do, and you've brought the fucking potential place to my doorstep. This is what I mean about having the channels open for stuff. When you're trying to manifest stuff, you can tell if your channels aren't open, because you can be thinking about the things that you want and there's just like not a sniff of them happening, and then people will be like, oh, that means it's not for me. No, it doesn't mean it's not for you. It just means that your fucking channels aren't open for it to come in. Basically, there is nothing on this earth that isn't for you ultimately. But some of the dreams that you have inside of you, you've got a lot of walls up against. That's kind of the way I look at it. I know, you know, for me, I've had to plow through this shit for myself. And people would be like, oh, well, if it doesn't come, it means it's not for me. And I'm like, disempowered bullshit. Sometimes we have the dream because of the expansion we have to go through in order to allow it to happen. And when I'm talking about expansion, I'm talking about unblocking those fucking channels, so our energy can expand outwards and we can actually encompass like being the person that has that. And we're not actually at that point of being the person that has that yet, because we've got all this constriction and contraction in our energy for various different reasons, all these limitations that are invisible, but we're holding them, you know. And at the point where we embrace being the person because we've got rid of the blockage, whatever it might be, sometimes multiple, that stuff can start to land, basically. But there is literally like anything that you could think of on this planet that you really fucking truly desire, rather than just like, well, I'd do that just to see if I can do it kind of thing. If you're not that interested, there's no fucking point in putting the effort in, right? But the stuff that really sets your soul on fire, you know, that stuff is meant for you. Even if it's not fucking showing up yet, it just means you've got shit in the way that needs clearing, you know? And that's obviously the work that I do with people mainly, is like sorting that crap out. It really pisses me off actually when you see all these people going, oh, are you just like, oh, it's obviously not meant for me, like, no. It's just like, if you can dream it, you can have it, but there might be some fucking shit you need to sort out because your internal structure's just not allowing it right now. And you can't think your way out of it. This is like going deeper than the thoughts. I must monitor my thoughts. It always makes me laugh with the fucking monitoring your thoughts thing. I'm like, who has the time to monitor their fucking thoughts? Not just the conscious thoughts, but the subconscious thoughts and the unconscious thoughts. Watching and waiting on the signs. My darling friend Harris, who is on Facebook, basically they are, well, they're non-binary, so I'm saying they. They put up a really good post the other day. It was just like, is this anyone else here? It's just like, I want this. The universe give me a sign, gets a sign. That's all well and good, but I actually need a signier sign than that. It's just like, that was so funny actually. The other day when I was in Sabrina, things tend to happen really fucking fast when we're together because we have this kind of energetic chemistry that goes on. It was so funny. So I start telling her about this fucking film that I was guided to watch, and there was a whole thing to do with Egypt and the Osiris spindle, which is all to do with time loops. And there was some stuff, I've had a lot of stuff coming up around time loops and dissolving time loops. And I started telling her about this in the car when we were on our way to see my mate Chino's play in Brixton on Sunday. She starts yawning her head off, and the next thing you know, there's a van on the side of the road that says Osiris decoration like this. And I was just like, oh my God, look. I was just like, that's obviously theme of the day. And she started laughing, and I was just like, and then started yawning more. And it was just like, and then we started clearing some stuff together. And it was just like, oh, well, that was good. We sorted that shit out. And it was also to do with another lifetime connection to do with Chino, my friend who wrote the play, who actually wasn't there that day. But like, there was a whole thing going on behind the scenes, and we sorted that out. But we come back to this thing of like, you start to realise you don't have to ask for a sign. You can just read what's going on. It's just like, what am I co-creating in my immediate environment? What's that telling me? Basically. And then you work with that and you can shift things. For example, trains that aren't working, whatever, basically. So yeah, that kind of went sideways, didn't it? Like all of the best ones. Start off talking about polarity, end up talking about Osiris spindles. Yeah, time loops. They're an interesting one. You might start to notice, you could say like a lot of patterns that people play out are like a form of time loop. You know, and like, you're like, why does this always happen to me? Like, why do I always get myself? Why do I always have certain situations with certain people? Or why is it I'm always seeing like a variations on a theme within my relationships? They're forms of time loops, basically. Looping patterns. And they tend to loop until we can dissolve them properly, which means going to the root and pulling them out, basically. And usually there's a little bit of understanding that wants to happen with that too. Yeah, I pulled out one today around, you can laugh at this. Okay, so I have had a thing, which is a bit of an interesting share. I've had a thing for a really long time around men always like having like 4 dishes that they cook. And every time I get into actually like being on, I'm going to call a mental loop on this kind of observation, it gets demonstrated to me by Al till it gets to the point where every time he cooks for me, he cooks the same fucking stuff. And I'm like, I'm so bored of it. Like, all of you know, like Nadia knows I'm a bit of a foodie. Everyone who knows me well knows I'm a bit of a foodie. I don't like eating the same fucking thing all the time. Therefore... that was an insufferable thing. And I was just like, I started off going, it's just Alan. And I was just like, oh no. And I started tracing it back through different relationships that I'd had. And I was just like, yeah, I think I just need to change that story completely. Because that's obviously creating this loop of me just being disappointed when men cook for me because it's like, oh God, you made chili again, kind of thing. Which is sad because I love being cooked for, but then it's like, I don't like being cooked for when it's boring things, like say like the same thing every time, kind of like, you know, you end up there going, I should be grateful because they're cooking for me, but at the same time you're there going, but this is really boring and they always do the same thing. And it's just like me going, maybe I'm culpable in that. There was actually a guy I went out with who only did 4 dishes. He did them very well. But I remember suggesting to him that we buy a cookery book about 3 months into our relationship. Because I was just like, every time I went to stay with him for the weekend, it would be like recycling the same food. And it was like, yeah, we need to do something different. We need to switch this shit up because I'm really bored already. It's quite funny. Anyhow, I am going to... I'm just thinking, he's cooking for me. He's not cooking the same old shit this evening because I changed it. He went out and I was just like, he's going to come back with a chili. I just had this sense he was going to come back with a chili. So I did some stuff. I was in the bath upstairs and I did some stuff and he came back with like completely random new ingredients. And he's making me something that he hasn't done before. And I'm like, woo! See, it works. When you know how to change this stuff, spaghetti or curry. Astrid, you need to change that unless you really like spaghetti and curry and like alternating between the two if he's cooking for you. Wouldn't you be amazed if like you just made that internal switch on yourself and then he turned around and went, I'm going to make paella as an example, or I don't know, a risotto, or I was going to say pavlova. That's not really a whole dinner though, is it? Ramen. I love ramen. You're not really into him cooking spaghetti or curry with you, or for you, should I say. Or... I know that, like, it's funny actually, because I was married to a chef. My ex-husband was a chef and I cooked more than he did. And we had a pattern of, his food was really amazing when he was at work and when he came home. Mind you, most chefs, there's a bit of tendency to this. When he was at home, he just couldn't be arsed. And I actually did I remember him actually turning around to someone at some point telling them that I was actually a better chef than he was. Although he wouldn't like to see me under pressure when there's a whole load of fucking tables all with checks on in the kitchen. I was just like, yeah, you make a good point. Like, I have actually worked in professional kitchens before, but not like on a massive scale. And I don't like cooking under massive time pressure for large amounts of people. I'm much more of I could run a supper club because you can kind of do it on your own time frame and you can like throw in all the entertainment you want. If I was actually running a restaurant and like people were going, I've ordered, where's my food? I'd be like, oh, fuck off, make it yourself, basically. And I used to have people say to me all the time, you should be a chef, like you should run a restaurant, because I love cooking and I'm a good cook. And I was just like, oh God, I worked in restaurants for years. It would be hell to have my own restaurant. I can't even imagine how pissed off I would get. Basically, no social life, living in a hot, sweaty kitchen, doing food to order, finishing at midnight, etc. Not really my thing. Ooh, beef rendang's lovely. I like one of my favourite kind of like quick and easy jobs at the moment is mee goreng. As a kind of, I do a sort of bastardised version of it. I don't necessarily use the same veg, but I do use the right seasoning. Mee goreng, nice egg dumped on top. I love Malaysian food. Apart from, I was going to say, actually, no, that's Indonesian. I can't stand gado. It's fucking disgusting. I can remember like having it when I was in Sumatra and just being like, oh, this is so bad. Like everyone was like, you must try the gado. It's like the national dish. Didn't like it at all. I don't think it helped that whoever it was that was running the place where I was staying had a very sweet tooth. So they put like, I don't even want to know how much sugar they put in the fucking dressing for this gado, but it was a lot. And I'm quite sensitive to sweet food, as in like my ex-boyfriend at the time who I went travelling with used to feed me penny sweets to see me kind of lose my shit a little bit, in terms of like I would get such a bad sugar high that I would be incoherent and dizzy and giggling and spinning around in circles like a small child. So yeah, I like someone basically giving me like a salad that has this horribly sweet dressing, like, yeah, I just couldn't do it. Anyhow, guys, I'm gonna love and leave you all now. From polarity to Indonesian food. That's a really good segue. We should be proud. I'm proud. Right, I'm going to go away and think about. I'm going to go away and probably channel my idea of what would be the most fun workshop to do involving energetic shiznit and bit of teaching stuff, and what the price should be and when I should do it and all the rest of it. I'm probably not going to channel all of that tonight. I will work it out in the next day or two, and I will be back with news once I've figured all that shit out. Mwah! I'd like your gado. Yeah, because you probably don't put 5 tons of fucking sugar in it. Yeah. And you, darling. Mwah. I was going to say, we definitely need to get together at some point. Oh, yours is spicy. Spicy's good. Sweet. I don't mind a little bit of palm sugar jaggery, but like not fucking bucket loads of stuff. Anyhow, mwah, mwah, mwah. Nadia, I will talk to you, she said. Now that you've done not download festival, fucking warm-up festival, and stuff, we should definitely plan to get together. Right. Mwah.